There's one power, there's one presence, all that is. And yet, in order for this to move from concept to living mystical experience, requires our, what we may call practicing the presence, of establishing time every day to get out of our own way, to become empty, to become open, so that the mind of God, the presence of God, can begin to reveal itself through us in new ways. Now, some of you may be a bit like me. I've tried in my life to muster up what I call Popeye spirituality. You remember Popeye, the little sailor man who ate enough, what was it? Spinach, exactly. If Popeye ate enough spinach, he got really strong and could tackle whatever he needed to tackle. How many of us have at times thought, if I could just learn another affirmation, if I could read another book, if I could get this, if I could get that, then I would finally have it, and so I could tackle this. Anybody else? Of course we have. Of course we have. This revealed itself to me, a powerful teaching, in an interesting way. The last 6 or 8 months that I lived on Maui, I had the opportunity. I was no longer working with the church. I was on my own. And so I started working directly with individuals in a type of private practice. Word spread, and most of the people that I worked with, it was over the phone. And for those of you that counsel or do any kind of energy work with individuals over the phone, you realize it's very powerful, because sometimes it's easiest when you don't see the person. So I'd have an individual on the telephone, and there I would sit in my space, and we'd start talking. And what happens for me is when I begin to work with an individual, and when they've agreed and we're agreeing to work together and open ourselves up to the great intelligent mind of the universe will, just as through Rafe or through Cerny, just as that music moves through them and plays them, sings through them, the presence of God can move through us in ways of knowingness, of seeing, of whatever we need. So when an individual and I would agree together that we were making ourselves available for the unseen aspect of us, what we call our higher self, to reveal itself through information, it begins to happen. So I remember one particular individual called early in the time when I first made myself available to start doing this. One of the first individuals I worked with, over the phone, I'm not seeing her, so I ask, how can I help you? And immediately the individual begins to talk about a situation, a challenge in her life. Now visually, with my eyes closed, what I'm beginning to see is this huge mountain. And the more she talks, the bigger and the bigger and the bigger the mountain gets. And so this third eye image, the visual that I'm seeing, I'm reading her energy, is a huge mountain. And this little teeny person standing there facing this mountain that is impossible to move. Anyone have a mountain in your life? So as she is talking, the more she tells me about the situation, and I'm not even really listening to this, I can see, and I'm seeing what's happening. There's this huge mountain. And so rather than focus on this, I then began to talk to her. And we began to remember some truths. And in asking her some questions, she began to remember. I said, do you believe that you're connected to a presence which permeates and transcends everything? And she said, yes. And the visual that I saw as she said yes, in this huge picture I'm seeing, she got just a little bit bigger. And as we talked a little bit more and a little bit more, every time I would ask questions and she began to connect with that, can you sense that you are connected? Yes, as a matter of fact, well, I know I'm connected. The more she connected with her purpose in life, we stopped looking at the mountain stuff, started focusing on her and her connection. And what happened was, in a matter of minutes, visually, it's as if this little teeny person had been like this, and all of a sudden she was able to stand up because she found herself in the fullness of her being connected in her power. And as she stood up, the mountain is still here, but what happened was she now is dwarfing the mountain. And when we can talk, when she was talking, and every time she could maintain her connectedness, she could easily dwarf that mountain, step over it. Now the mountain did not go away, but it completely changed in perspective. Do you understand what I'm saying? I worked with a number of individuals right in a row, and I'm sure it was so that the universe could teach me. And they all came in with some sort of huge mountain in their life, and the visual may be different, but it was exactly the same. There's this giant thing and this little individual. And every single one of them, if they could connect with their greater sense of connection, this became dwarfed. It didn't go away, but they now knew how to deal with it so that it did not overwhelm their life. That's a huge, huge shift. When Jesus, the Master Teacher, said, you can say to this mountain, be moved, and the mountain shall go from here to there. Now we're realizing it's not calling for Popeye spirituality. It's not asking us to learn so much and to get so strong physically that we could tackle that mountain. No, the mountain is moved in perspective. And once we are fully connected to who we are and why we are, we now know how to respond to the outer circumstances of our life. A number of years ago, I worked for a children's toy company, and I had the opportunity to go to New York City every year for the International Toy Fair when the brand new toys and everything was being rolled out. And this particular year, there was an individual who, in his life, was financially devastated. Everything that he was having some physical challenges, problems at home, everything that could possibly go wrong had gone wrong in this individual's life. And his prayer simply was, may I remember the truth. May I remember the truth of who I am and connect to that so that I know how to respond to all these needs in my life. You see, this individual opened up their self to the one power and the one presence so that it could impress itself through them however it needed to show up. So that particular year, that individual got an idea. It is a simple idea that changed their life. Because that year at the International Toy Fair, they had this little teeny box, squares. One side was red, one side was blue, one side was yellow. Do you remember what that was called? Now that was an idea. Ideas are held, we could say, in the mind of God. And as Charles Fillmore or the surgeon did, they're making their self available for this to make an impression upon them and them through them. Because that's exactly what we're seeking, is to have that make an impression in our life, through our life. Recent studies have pointed to what we now understand as a quantum universe. Why does it matter that there's one power and one presence, and how do we connect to this one power and one presence? Well, the first way is to consciously place ourselves in alignment with, in connection. Again, just as Charles Fillmore or the surgeon demonstrated. There's no shortcut from moving this from a concept to a living experience. The only way to do it is to be in relationship with it. And so it requires our making ourselves available. The next thing that we do is realize, where are those times and those places that I place my power outside of myself? You see, the individual that I just shared the story, the individuals who would see a mountain, can you see how they were placing their power outside of their self? There's a book that is titled Of Monkeys and Dragons, Freedom from the Tyranny of Disease. The woman who wrote this book, her name is Michelle Longo O'Donnell. She opened one of the first holistic healthcare clinics in the United States. It's in Texas. In Michelle's story, she was the head nurse in an ICU unit, a pediatric intensive care unit in a hospital.